Chapter 1 The Posting at the Open Hand. I am Bryce of the Cinder Archive, and this is Chapter 1 The Posting at the Open Hand. There is a particular kind of trust a city learns to extend to the thing that keeps it alive, and Aetherglen learned its version early. Not faith, exactly, and not understanding, but the long habit of waking to find the brass still humming and the rift still held. Other cities trust their rivers to stay in their banks. We trust ours to stay where it's put. This is the story of 5 people who do not know each other yet. For now, there is only a notice going up on a public board, on an ordinary morning, in a city that has learned not to look too closely at its own miracles. Let's begin where the notice does. Poll. The open hand exchange wakes before the rest of the city does, the way bureaucracies always do, as if punctuality were a kind of penance. Dawn comes to the concourse in pieces of fist first, as a gray suggestion through the steam-fogged glass of the roof, then as hard gold lines that catch the brass-cased notice board and set its 100 small hinges glinting. The board itself is older than anyone currently employed to maintain it, a slow-turning drum of pinned paper and stamped wax, and at this hour it belongs to exactly one person, a clerk in exchange gray, sleeves rolled, ink-stained to the elbow, working through the overnight stack with the brisk indifference of someone who has read 10,000 requests for lost dogs, unpaid debts, and apprentices wanted. She works through the stack methodically, lost cargo manifest, pinned. Apprenticeship opening at a clockmaker's, pinned. A formal challenge from one ironbreaker initiate to another, witnessed and sealed, pinned with the particular care reserved for things that might end in a lawsuit. Then there's the one with no sigil. She turns it over once, looking for a hallmark, a signature, anything. There's nothing. Just close, careful handwriting and an offer that doesn't explain itself. Discreet recovery and destruction of dangerous unregistered magitech. Altier coin. Inquire in person. No questions asked of those who don't ask any of their own .hd. The clerk reads it twice. She has been doing this work long enough to recognize the shape of a problem before she recognizes the problem itself. And this has that shape of vague. Vague in exactly the way that things are vague when the person writing them is trying very hard not to lie. She stamps it anyway. That's not her job to judge. Another one of Sterling's messes, she mutters, mostly to the board, mostly to herself, and pins it up between the lost dog and the clockmaker's apprenticeship, where it looks, for the moment, like nothing at all. The drum turns. The notice settles into its place among the others, indistinguishable at a glance, and the concourse goes on filling with the ordinary foot traffic of a city built on neutral ground axis. Vow paladins crossing paths with velvet ledger fences, wild druids stepping carefully around gear-right apprentices hauling crated parts, none of them so much as glancing at the new addition to the board. The exchange exists for exactly this kind of morning. 13 halls, 1 floor, no one's territory, and everyone's. Whatever business brought any of them here, it has nothing to do with a stranger's coin and a job with no name attached, for now. Across the city, in the Ashen Vows training yard, Senna Breck runs the same patrol drill for the 4th time that morning, and runs it like she means to win something. There is nothing to win. The yard is quiet at this hour, drill-worn stone underfoot, ash-gray banners hanging slack in air too still to lift them, and the only enemy in the exercise is an imagined one, a perimeter breach that exists purely in the choreography of the drill, a threat the Vow trains against because peacetime doesn't excuse unreadiness. Senna takes the imagined breach personally. She always has. "You drill like the rift's about to crack," says Sergeant Holt, leaning against the practice rack with his arms folded and the particular patience of a man who has watched 100 eager paladins burn themselves out against nothing. "It isn't. Not yet," Senna says, and resets her stance. Holt laughs as, not unkindly, but with the dry edge of someone who's said this before, and expects to say it again. There's a version of devotion that looks like readiness, Brack, and there's a version that looks like running from boredom with a sword in your hand. From here, they look the same. They're not the same. I didn't say they weren't. He pushes off the rack. I said they look the same. From here. She doesn't answer that, mostly because she doesn't have an answer that wouldn't prove his point. The truth is simpler and harder to admit out loud. She joined the vow to matter, to put her oath against something that needed it, and 3 years of patrol rotations and ceremonial duty have given her plenty of discipline and almost nothing to actually protect. The drills keep the edge from going dull. They don't give it anything to cut. It's one of the junior initiates, jogging in from the gate with a folded scrap of gossip rather than any official word, who brings the morning's only real news. "There's a posting up at the exchange," he says, slightly out of breath. slightly too pleased with himself for having heard first. No sigil on it. All-tier coin for something about destroying unregistered magitech. Half the Val's already talking about it. Destroying it? Not registering it? Senna asks. That's what they're saying. Who's offering Hall-tier coin for an unregistered job? Nobody knows. That's the part everyone likes. Senna is already calculating the watt to the exchange before she's finished hearing the rest of it. What kind of unregistered magitech? What kind of danger? Who's paying, and why they'd pay this well for something they don't want their name on? None of those questions have answers yet. She finds she doesn't especially need them to have answers yet. There is a posting. It might be something. That's enough to move on. Braca, Holt says, watching her sheath her practice blade with the particular efficiency of someone who has already decided to leave. You haven't been excused. I know. That an apology? It's an acknowledgement. She's already walking. I'll be back by evening prayer. Holt doesn't call after her. He's seen this look on her before. Not recklessness, not quite, but something adjacent to it, a hunger dressed up as duty that hasn't yet been tested against anything real enough to teach it the difference. He doesn't try to stop her. He just watches her go, and hopes, in the vague, unspoken way sergeants hope about paladins they've trained from Green, that whatever she's walking toward is worth the speed she's walking at. 3 districts over and 1 social class removed, Wake Talmadge is closing a different kind of deal in the back room of a shop that doesn't advertise what it actually sells. The Velvet Ledger doesn't have a training yard, doesn't have banners, doesn't have anything so formal as a hall sigil stitched into a uniform. Its members would tell you, if you asked nicely and paid for the privilege, that its whole structure is the point, a guild built on the principle that some business is everyone's business and no one's signature. Wick has been working its gray channels since before he was old enough to do so legally, and by now he can read a room the way other people read a contract. This particular room smells like candle tallow and old dust, lit low enough that the coin scales on the table cast more shadow than light, and the fence across from him. A thin, careful man named Auric who has bought from Wick 3 times before and trusted him exactly as far as that history justifies AW is taking entirely too long counting out a payment for goods that aren't, strictly, his to sell. You're slow today, Wick says. I'm thorough. There's a difference between thorough and stalling, Auric, and you're doing the second one. Auric doesn't dignify that with a response, which is itself a kind of answer. He finishes the count, slides the coin across, and is in the middle of reaching for the ledger book, the literal ledger, not the hall ledger, when the door at the back of the shop opens and a runner leans in with the kind of news that travels faster than official channels ever manage. Exchange has a new posting, the runner says, to the room generally. No sigil. Hall-tier coin for some kind of recovery and destroy job. Word's already halfway across the district. The room's attention shifts, briefly and completely, the way a crowd's attention shifts toward a fire, 2 streets over 2 streets, not because anyone's decided to care yet, but because the possibility of caring is too interesting to ignore. Auric looks up from his ledger. A pair of regulars near the door stop their own quiet transaction to listen. Wick doesn't move, but he's listening harder than anyone else in the room, doing the math he always does the instant money and mystery show up in the same sentence. Hall tier, he repeats. For an unregistered job. No name on it. That's what they're saying. That's either the stupidest posting I've heard all year, or someone's about to pay an idiot's price for something they desperately don't want their own people doing. Wick turns this over for a moment, weighing it the way he weighs everything at CRE risk against reward, reputation against silence. The dozen ways a job like this could turn out to be either nothing or everything. Could be both. You going to find out which? Obviously. He pockets his cut of the deal with Auric, counts it once more out of habit rather than suspicion, and is out the door before the runners finished relaying the rest of what little anyone actually knows. The exchange is a fair walk from here, but Wick has never minded distance when there's a number worth chasing at the end of it, and there's something almost pleasant in not yet knowing whether this particular number is a trap or a windfall. He'll know soon enough. He always does. Eventually, usually a little later than he'd like, but soon enough. At the city's ragged northern edge, where the brass towers give way first to scaffolding and then, grudgingly, to actual trees, Orsa von Trell is standing in a Wildroot conclave way station she did not ask to be summoned to, listening to machinery hum where birdsong used to be enough. She has been back in Aetherglen for 4 days. It feels longer. The conclave's business here, some dispute over a logging concession encroaching on land. The rift's runoff has made strange in ways the Crown surveyors don't fully understand, is the kind of tedious, necessary work that someone has to do, and apparently this season, that someone is her, regardless of how loudly every instinct she has left the wilds with says this city is not where she belongs. You'll get used to the noise again, says the liaison assigned to brief her, a younger conclave member named Pell, who has clearly never lived anywhere quieter than this and doesn't understand why anyone would want to. Give it a week. I gave it a week the last time I was here. It didn't take. That a complaint? It's an observation. Orsa watches a siphon tower through the gap in the tree line, its low, constant thrum audible even from here, laid over the memory of an actual forest, the way a bad translation sits over the original text. Close enough to recognize, wrong enough to grate. I didn't leave because I lacked walls, if that's what you're implying. Pell, wisely, does not push that further. Instead, he produces, almost as an afterthought, the day's other piece of news delivered with the breezy unconcern of someone passing along a rumor rather than a responsibility. There's a posting up at the exchange if you're looking for something to do while the concession business sorts itself out. Hall tier coin, something about hunting down dangerous unregistered magitech. No sigil on the notice. Bit odd. Define odd. Nobody's claiming it. Usually that means either nobody important wants their name on it, or it's a trap for the kind of person who doesn't ask why. Orsa considers this for longer than the offhand way it was delivered deserves. She has no particular interest in Aetherglen's machinery, dangerous or otherwise, if anything, the idea of unregistered magitech roaming loose in a city already saturated with the registered kind strikes her as exactly the sort of problem this place built for itself the moment it decided raw rift power and brass housing were a good combination to live on top of. But the alternative to taking the posting is more days standing in this way station arguing land rights with surveyors who think a forest is a resource rather than a relationship, and at least the exchange job would put her somewhere with a clear, nameable purpose, however briefly. I'll look into it, she says, which is as close as she comes to enthusiasm about anything in this city. That a yes? It's a yes until it's a no. She's already moving, the cobblestones unfamiliar and hard underfoot in a way the forest floor never is, each step a small, specific irritation she's long since stopped expecting to go away. Pell doesn't follow. He doesn't need to. Whatever this posting turns out to be, it's hers to investigate now, the way an obligation is yours the moment you stop actively refusing it. Not chosen, exactly, but accepted all the same, the way she's accepted most of what the city has asked of her since she arrived. In the bloodless choir's examination hall, Tamsin Oakley Veery is holding her left forearm very still under a strip of pale chalk light, doing her best to make sure no one looks at it too closely. The examination itself is routine, a quarterly assessment of arcane control, the kind every choir member sits through whether they like it or not, scratch. Quill notes and clipboard questions about resonance thresholds and casting fatigue. Tamsin has always tested well. She's young for her standing, brilliant in the specific, demonstrable way that makes instructors proud and classmates quietly resentful, and under ordinary circumstances this would be an unremarkable morning. It's the instructor who notices, the way instructors always seem to notice the one thing Tamsin would rather they didn't. That scar's brighter than it was last quarter, the woman says, not unkindly, pausing her clipboard notes to actually look at the faint copper-tone mark along the inside of Tamsin's forearm. The one that flares and dims with? Use the way no other choir members cost. Tell does, not in that particular color, not in that particular pattern. Anything you want to flag? It's nothing, Tamsin says, too quickly, and then, recovering, casting load's been higher this cycle. That's all it is. The instructor doesn't push there's a dozen mundane reasons a tell might brighten, and Tamsin has never given anyone cause to suspect there's more to hers than ordinary overuse adage. But she holds the look, a half-second longer than the explanation strictly earns, the particular half-second of a person filing something away rather than letting it go. Then she moves on to the next line of questions, and the moment passes, the way it always passes, leaving Tamsin with the small familiar relief of having dodged something she can't yet name and isn't ready to. It's a fellow examinee, gathering her own materials at the end of the session, who mentions the posting secondhand, half distracted, the kind of news that travels through a hall, the way water travels through cracked stone, finding every available gap. Exchange has something new up. No hall sigil, paying like one, though. Recovery and destruction of unregistered magitech, apparently. Tamsin's first reaction is curiosity, plain and immediate, the kind she's never quite managed to suppress when magitech and unregistered show up in the same sentence. Her second reaction, closer behind it than she'd like, is a flicker of something else. Not recognition, not yet, nothing she could point to or explain, just a faint, unplaceable unease at the phrase itself, gone almost before she notices it. "Worth a look," she says, mostly to herself, and decides, the way she decides most things, before she's fully finished thinking it through. Across the city, on the Ironbreaker Hall's scuffed silver sparring floor, Bram Cold Iron is in the process of declining a fight he could win without much effort. "Scared, Cold Iron?" the challenger says, a younger fighter, broad and confident in the specific way that hasn't yet been tested by anyone who'd actually hurt him, arms loose at his sides in a stance that's more performance than preparation. "Bored," Bram says, and doesn't move from where he's leaning against the rack, arms crossed, immovable in a way that has nothing to do with stubbornness and everything to do with simple disinterest. "That's supposed to insult me?" It's supposed to be accurate. Bram has fought this particular shape of challenge 100 times since he stopped caring about hall-rank eager fighters looking to make a name against someone who's never bothered chasing one of his own, mistaking his lack of title for a lack of edge. He's never been interested in correcting the assumption through violence. There's no point proving something to a room that's already decided, one way or the other, what it thinks of you. Go find someone who wants the match as much as you do. "I'm not in the mood today." The challenger, frustrated and unsure whether he's been insulted or dismissed, eventually retreats to find a more cooperative opponent. Bram watches him go without much interest, and would likely have spent the rest of the morning exactly this way, leaning, declining, unbothered, if a passing armorer hadn't mentioned, between one task and the next, that the exchange had a strange new posting up, paying well, no hall behind it that anyone could name. Bram doesn't say much in response. He rarely does. But something in the description owl, unregistered, dangerous, no one willing to put a name to its owl, catches at the part of him that used to be a soldier before it was anything else, the part that's never quite stopped noticing when something doesn't add up. He pushes off the rack, collects his coat, and heads for the exchange without telling anyone where he's going or why, which is, for Bram, more or less the same thing as deciding. By the time the afternoon light has gone properly gold across the Open Hand Exchange's registration hall, 5 people who have never met arrive there within the same quarter hour, each holding a copy of the same notice, none of them yet aware that the others exist. Senna arrives first, posting in hand, scanning the registration desks with the brisk readiness of someone expecting to be tested the moment she steps through the door. Wick arrives close behind her, already reading the room the way he reads every room, who's in charge, who's worth talking to, what this is actually going to cost him before anyone tells him the number. Orsa comes in third, posture stiff with the particular discomfort of brass and stone architecture after a lifetime spent mostly without it. The notice held a little away from her body, as if it might do something unexpected. Tamsin and Bram arrive almost together, from opposite ends of the hall, neither one noticing the other until they're both standing at the same desk, looking at the same clerk, holding the same paper. It's the registration clerk, not the one who pinned the notice that morning, but another, equally unbothered by the particulars of other people's strange jobs, who notices first. "You're all here for the same posting," she says. Not quite a question, sliding 5 identical sheets of paper across the desk to compare against the 5 now laid in front of her, side by side, indistinguishable except for the slightly different creases each one has taken in 5 different pockets on 5 different walks across the city. Nobody answers right away. Instead, there's a longer, quieter beat, 5 strangers taking each other in for the first time, doing the small private arithmetic of what kind of person answers a posting like this. The particular silence of people realizing, all at once, that whatever this job actually is, they are not going to be doing it alone. Senna is the first to break it, because Senna is usually the first to break any silence that's gone on a beat too long for her comfort. "I suppose we're meant to introduce ourselves. We're meant to find out what we actually signed up for first," Wick says, not unkindly, but with the flat practicality of someone who's learned not to commit to company before he's confirmed the job's worth the commitment. Orsa says nothing at all, which is its own kind of statement. Tamsin and Bram exchange the briefest possible look. Not quite recognition, not quite wariness, something closer to 2 people independently deciding the other one probably isn't going to be a problem. The clerk, entirely unmoved by the moment unfolding in front of her, is already gathering the 5 postings into a single stack when a runner gear-right hall colors, moving with the brisk, slightly harried energy of someone who's done this exact errand before and expects to do it again, as he crosses the hall toward them with a directness that suggests he already knows exactly who he's looking for. "U5. The exchange posting. It isn't quite a question. Come with me." "Come with you where?" Senna asks. The runner doesn't quite smile, but something close to it crosses his face. The particular look of someone who's about to hand off a problem he's relieved isn't his anymore. He'll see you now. He doesn't say who. He turns and walks, clearly expecting them to follow, and after a beat, 5 strangers exchanging one more wordless glance, the kind that asks, "Are we really doing this without anyone saying it aloud?" They do. 5 postings left behind on the registration desk, the clerk already filing them away as though the morning's strangest job has just, quietly, stopped being strange enough to remark on. None of them know yet whose mess they've just agreed to clean up. They're about to. Poll. The significanti? End of Chapter 1.